Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel once again, Read with me. Today I have come with another beautiful short story from this collection called Grandma's Bag of Stories by Sudha Murty. Let's read it. The Unending Story. Today Aja, Aji and Vishnu Kaka were all feeling sad. The children's holidays were nearly over and it was nearing the time when they would go back to their homes. For 3 weeks, the houses had echoed with their laughter, games, and quarrels. Now all would be quiet once again, till they returned for the next holiday. The children too were feeling sad and had gathered around their grandparents in a tight little group. Raghu, the eldest, said, "We had more fun this holiday than we have ever had, even more than when we visited Disneyland. And it was all because of the stories." Aja said, "When I was still working as a school teacher, I always found it was so much easier to get my students' attention when I told the lessons in the form of stories." Anand said, "I find it really boring to read history from a book. But if you tell us the stories from history, I'm sure we will remember everything." Everyone now turned their bright eyes on Aji. "How can you tell us only one story even on this last day, Aji? We want more," they clamored. But Aji shook her head. "If you eat only pickles and laddus, will you be healthy? Stories are like that. You can't spend all your time listening to stories. Then it will be boring, like the unending story that a king once had to hear." "I want a story, and that's an order," shouted King Pratap Singh of Mainagar. King Pratap was only 15 years old and still a boy at heart. He didn't like being a king much because he was supposed to be doing serious things like keeping the law, listening to his people's problems, and all kinds of dreary things like that. The only part he liked about being a ruler was that everyone had to obey him. How he loved giving orders and making all kinds of demands. And what he loved the most was listening to stories. Every day he insisted on listening to at least 10 stories. All the storytellers in his kingdom lined up at his court. They told him funny stories, scary stories, magical stories, and anything else that came to their mind. King Pratap listened to all with rapt attention. He loved stories and storytellers so much that whenever he had a good tale, he would shower the teller with gold, silver, and all kinds of wonderful presents. His ministers shied and shook their heads and tried to explain, "Your Majesty, stories are all very well, but you should be listening to them after your work is done. Your people need you to do so many things for them. If you spend all your time wrapped up in fantasies, how will the end prosper?" But King Pratap paid no attention. It was stories he wanted, and stories he would get. But how long could the people provide him stories? Soon the tales began to dry out. Some tried to cleverly tell him ones they had related long back. But Pratap was sharp as a needle. "I have heard that one." Off with his head for repeating a story. Oh, how his ministers had to plead with him to pardon the culprits. Finally, disgusted with all the storytellers in his land, the king announced, "I want someone to tell me a story that will go on and on till I ask him to stop. Anyone who can do this will get half my kingdom as a prize." His ministers were even more horrified at this. Half the kingdom to some woolly-headed writer and teller of stories. How horrible! They all tried to show the king the foolishness of his ways, but he was adamant. A story that lasted for days, even weeks, was what he wanted, and that was that. Soon a long line of men and women appeared at his court. Each one wanted to win the big prize, but none of these stories were good enough for King Pratap. Boring, he shouted at some. Rubbish, he yelled at others. Cock and bull, he bellowed at yet others. Meanwhile, work on the kingdom's affairs had come to a stop. All the ministers were sitting wringing their hands and wondering how to bring back their king to solving all the important issues. Finally, the chief minister, who was wise and clever, had an idea. The next day, a scurfy, crazy-looking man turned up at the court. His hair was in a mess, his clothes were half torn, and on his feet he wore torn shoes from which his toes stuck out. He marched up to the palace and demanded to be given an audience with the king. The guards shied and let him in. They were used to having all kinds of characters turning up at the gates wanting to tell stories to the king. The old man was admitted into the king's chamber. There he made himself comfortable, drank a huge jug of water, and without introducing himself started his story. This story begins in a humble farmer's field. The farmer had toiled days and weeks and months and grown a bumper crop of sugar cane. He sold the sugar cane to the nearby sugar factory and they made sacks and sacks of sugar out of it. Everyone was so happy. All this sugar would be sold in the markets and make everyone very rich. That year their children would get news, like nice new clothes. Their stores would be full of food and their wives would be very happy with them. Now all that sugar had to be stored and kept carefully till the sacks could be taken to the market to sell. The factory people poured the sugar into many sacks and lugged them into a storeroom. In the storeroom, who would you find but a colony of ants? They had decided that building their house near such a ready supply of their favorite food was a very good idea and were always on the lookout for new batches of sugar to be stored there. No sooner had the sacks been kept than the lines of ants marched up to them. They found little holes to make their way in, and the first ant went into the first bag of sugar, took one sugar crystal and went back. The next ant went into the bag and took a crystal and returned home. Another went into the bag and took a crystal and returned home. Yet another went into the bag and took a crystal and returned home. So on and on the storyteller droned. King Pratap found he had nearly dozed off. The day had passed by and he was still listening to the same story. Stop, stop, he ordered. I will listen to the rest of the story tomorrow. The next morning, the old man turned up as usual and started from where he had left off the previous day. Yesterday, I was telling the ants came and picked up the sugar crystals. Now, the next ant went towards the bag of sugar and took a crystal and went back home. Another went and took a crystal and returned home. Another ant. The story went on and on like this. Lunch and dinner passed by, but nothing new happened. By now, King Pratap was bursting with rage. How dare anyone tell him such a boring story? What kind of a story is this? He complained. What will happen next? What happened to the farmer? But the old man only smiled and said, "Have patience, your majesty." That year the yield was very good and there were thousands of bags of sugar. I have to tell you how the ants collected all the sugar. Oh, stop, stop, Pratap shouted. Stop this boring story at once. The man now stood up and said, Fine, if you are ordering me to stop, I have won the prize. Give me half your kingdom. The king was in a dilemma now. He had announced a competition and prize, no doubt, but could he honestly give away half the kingdom to this crazy-looking storyteller with this boring tales? As he sat pondering, the man grinned even wider and took off his dirty robe, rubbed off the dirt from his face, and shook back his shaggy like white hair, everyone was astonished. Why, this was the chief minister himself. Don't worry, your majesty, the minister told his overjoyed king. I did not want half of your kingdom. I only wanted to show you how you were wrong to neglect your work and listen to stories night and day. Your people deserve a good king, someone who will work hard to look after them, someone who will think of his own happiness only once his people are happy. That's what good kings do. Not just giving orders and enjoying himself. Poor Pratap looked ashamed at this. Yes, he had been an extremely selfish king. From now on, story time was only at night after all his work was done. So that was how the summer holidays ended. Everyone packed their bags and reached the station. Their mothers had come to take them back home. Aja, Aji, Vishnu Kaka, Damu, Rehmat Chacha, everyone had come to see them off. No one felt like leaving Aji's side, and Minu kept hugging her till she had to board the train. Soon the train puffed out of the station. The children leaned out to wave their goodbyes. Slowly, Shigagan got left behind, but the children would continue to remember their Aja and Aji and everyone else, and all the stories which would remain with them forever. And they would be back during the next summer holidays when they would hear so many more. Thank you so much for listening to this, not only this particular story, but the whole, collection of this particular book with me. So if you because this is the end story actually. So if you like this, do like, share and comment down below. If you have any other suggestions for me to read out for you, let me know. And I'm really sorry for the noises, background noises and all. Soon I will be back with a beautiful short story for sure. Till then, stay happy, stay blessed, and smile. And Merry Christmas in advance is coming, right? So I will be saying it from now on, at least the whole December. Okay, bye bye. Tata.